In the late 1970s, Afghanistan was thrust into turmoil as Soviet forces invaded, sparking a brutal conflict. It was in this crucible of war that a young man named Osama bin Laden would emerge. Osama bin Muhammad bin Awad bin Laden was a Saudi-born Islamic dissident and militant leader who was the founder and first general emir of Al-Qaeda from 1988 until his death in 2011. Ideologically a pan-Islamist, his organization is designated as a terrorist group by the United Nations Security Council, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, the European Union, and various other countries. He is most widely known as the mastermind of the September 11th attacks in the United States. Osama bin Laden's name is most frequently rendered as Osama bin Laden. The FBI and Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, as well as other U.S. governmental agencies, have used either Osama bin Laden or the accepted transliteration Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden's full name, Osama bin Muhammad bin Awad bin Laden, means Osama, son of Muhammad, son of Awad, son of Laden. Muhammad refers to bin Laden's father Muhammad bin Laden. Awad refers to his grandfather, Awad bin Aboud bin Laden, a Kindite Hadrami tribesman. Laden therefore refers to bin Laden's great-great-grandfather, Laden Ali al-Qahtani. He was named Osama, meaning lion, after Osama ibn Zayd, one of the companions of Muhammad. Osama bin Laden was born on March 10, 1957 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. His father, Muhammad bin Awad bin Laden, was a billionaire construction magnate with close ties to the Saudi royal family, and Muhammad bin Laden's 10th wife, Syrian Hamida al-Adas, then called Alia Ghanem. In a 1998 interview, bin Laden gave his birth date as 10 March 1957. Despite it being generally accepted that bin Laden was born in Riyadh, his birthplace was listed as Jeddah in the initial FBI and Interpol documents. Muhammad bin Laden divorced Hamida soon after Osama bin Laden was born. Muhammad recommended Hamida to Muhammad al-Adas, an associate. Al-Adas married Hamida in the late 1950s or early 1960s. The couple had 4 children, and bin Laden lived in the new household with 3 half-brothers and 1 half-sister. The bin Laden family made $5 billion in the construction industry, of which Osama later inherited around $25 to $30 million. Bin Laden was raised as a devout Sunni Muslim from 1968 to 1976. He attended the elite Al-Thajer Model School. He studied economics and business administration at King Abdulaziz University. Some reports suggest he earned a degree in civil engineering in 1979, or a degree in public administration in 1981. Bin Laden attended an English language course in Oxford, England, during 1971. One source described him as hard-working, another said he left university during his 3rd year without completing a college degree. At university, bin Laden's main interest was religion, where he was involved in both interpreting the Quran and jihad and charitable work. Other interests included writing poetry, reading, with the works of Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery and Charles de Gaulle said to be among his favorites, Black Stallions, and association football, in which he enjoyed playing at centre forward and followed the English club Arsenal. At age 17 in 1974, bin Laden married Najwa Ghanem at Latakia, Syria, but they were later separated and she left Afghanistan on September 9, 2001, 2 days before the 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden's other known wives were Khadija Sharif, married 1983, divorced 1990s, Karaya Sabar, married 1985, Siham Sabar, married 1987, and Amal al-Sada, married 2000. Some sources also list a 6th wife, name unknown, whose marriage to bin Laden was annulled soon after the ceremony. Bin Laden fathered between 20 and 26 children with his wives. Many of bin Laden's children fled to Iran following the September 11 attacks, and as of 2010, Iranian authorities reportedly continue to control their movements. Nasser al-Bahri, who was bin Laden's personal bodyguard from 1997 to 2001, details bin Laden's personal life in his memoir. He describes him as a frugal man and strict father, who enjoyed taking his large family on shooting trips and picnics in the desert. Bin Laden's father Mohammed died in 1967 in an airplane crash in Saudi Arabia when his American pilot Jim Harrington misjudged a landing. Bin Laden's eldest half-brother, Salem bin Laden, the subsequent head of the bin Laden family, was killed in 1988 near San Antonio, Texas, in the United States, when he accidentally flew a plane into power lines. According to former CIA analyst Michael Scheuer, who led the CIA's hunt for Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda leader was motivated by a belief that U.S. foreign policy has oppressed, killed, or otherwise harmed Muslims in the Middle East. Nonetheless, bin Laden criticized the U.S. for its secular form of governance, calling upon Americans to convert to Islam and reject the immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gambling, and usury, in a letter published in late 2002. Bin Laden believed that the Islamic world was in crisis and that the complete restoration of Sharia law would be the only way to set things right in the Muslim world. He opposed such alternatives as secular government, as well as pan-Arabism, socialism, communism, and democracy. He subscribed to the Athari school of Islamic theology. These beliefs, in conjunction with violent jihad, have sometimes been called Qutbism after being promoted by Sayyid Qutb. Bin Laden believed that Afghanistan, under the rule of Mullah Omar's Taliban, was the only Islamic country in the Muslim world. Bin Laden consistently dwelt on the need for violent jihad to right what he believed were injustices against Muslims perpetrated by the United States and sometimes by other non-Muslim states. In his Letter to the American People, published in 2002, bin Laden described the formation of Israeli state as a crime which must be erased and demanded that the United States withdraw all of its civilians and military personnel from the Arabian Peninsula, as well as from all Muslim lands. Bin Laden supported the targeting of American civilians, in retaliation against U.S. troops indiscriminately attacking Muslims. He asserted that this policy could deter U.S. military from targeting Muslim women and children. Furthermore, he argued that all Americans were complicit in the crimes of their government due to majority of them electing it to power and paying taxes that fund the U.S. military. According to Noah Feldman, bin Laden's assertion was that, since the United States is a democracy, all citizens bear responsibility for its government's actions, and civilians are therefore fair targets. Bin Laden's overall strategy for achieving his goals against much larger enemies such as the Soviet Union and United States was to lure them into a long war of attrition in Muslim countries, attracting large numbers of jihadists who would never surrender. He believed this would lead to economic collapse of the enemy countries, by bleeding them dry. Al-Qaeda manuals expressed this strategy. In a 2004 tape broadcast by Al Jazeera, bin Laden spoke of bleeding America to the point of bankruptcy. Bin Laden was heavily anti-Semitic, stating that most of the negative events that occurred in the world were the direct result of Jewish actions. In a December 1998 interview with Pakistani journalist Rahimullah Yousafzai, bin Laden stated that Operation Desert Fox was proof that Israeli Jews controlled the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom, directing them to kill as many Muslims as they could. In a letter released in late 2002, He stated that Jews controlled the civilian media outlets, politics, and economic institutions of the United States. In a May 1998 interview with ABC's John Miller, bin Laden stated that the Israeli state's ultimate goal was to annex the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East into its territory and enslave its peoples, as part of what he called a Greater Israel. He stated that Jews and Muslims could never get along and that war was inevitable between them, and further accused the U.S. of stirring up anti-Islamic sentiment that he claimed that the U.S. State Department and U.S. Department of Defense were controlled by Jews, for the sole purpose of serving the Israeli state's goals. He often delivered warnings against alleged Jewish conspiracies. These Jews are masters of usury and leaders in treachery. They will leave you nothing either in this world or the next. Shia Muslims have been listed along with heretics, the United States, and Israel as the four principal enemies of Islam at ideology classes of bin Laden's Al-Qaeda organization. Bin Laden was opposed to music on religious grounds, and his attitude towards technology was mixed. He was interested in earth-moving machinery and genetic engineering of plants on the one hand, but rejected chilled water on the other. He also believed climate change to be a serious threat and penned a letter urging Americans to work with President Barack Obama to make a rational decision to save humanity from the harmful gases that threaten its destiny. After leaving college in 1979, bin Laden went to Pakistan, joined Abdullah Azzam and used money and machinery from his own construction company to help the Mujahideen resistance in the Afghan-Soviet War. He later told a journalist, "I felt outraged that an injustice had been committed against the people of Afghanistan." From 1979 to 1992, the United States, as part of CIA activities in Afghanistan, specifically Operation Cyclone, Saudi Arabia, and China provided between $6 to $12 billion worth of financial aid and weapons to tens of thousands of Mujahideen through Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI. British journalist Jason Burke wrote, "He did not receive any direct funding or training from the U.S. during the 1980s. Nor did his followers. The Afghan Mujahideen, via Pakistan's ISI intelligence agency, received large amounts of both. Some bled to the Arabs fighting the Soviets but nothing significant." Bin Laden met and built relations with Hamid Gul, who was a three-star general in the Pakistani army and head of the ISI agency. Although the United States provided the money and weapons, the training of militant groups was entirely done by the Pakistani Armed Forces and the ISI. According to Brigadier Muhammad Yusuf, the person in charge of the ISI's Afghan operations at the time, it was a strict policy of Pakistan to prevent any American involvement in the distribution of funds or weapons or in the training of the Mujahideen. And the CIA officials stayed in the embassy in Islamabad, never entering Afghanistan or meeting with the Afghan resistance leaders themselves. According to some CIA officers, beginning in early 1980, bin Laden acted as a liaison between the Saudi General Intelligence Presidency, GIP, and Afghan warlords. No evidence of contact between the CIA and bin Laden exists in the CIA archives. Steve Call states that although bin Laden may not have been a formal, salaried GIP agent, it seems clear that bin Laden did have a substantial relationship with Saudi intelligence. Bin Laden's first trainer was U.S. Special Forces Commando Ali Mohammed. By 1984, bin Laden and Azzam established Maktab al-Khidmat, which funneled money, arms, and fighters from around the Arab world into Afghanistan. Through al-Khidmat, bin Laden's inherited family fortune paid for air tickets and accommodation, paid for paperwork with Pakistani authorities and provided other such services for the jihadi fighters. Bin Laden established camps inside Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan and trained volunteers from across the Muslim world to fight against the Soviet-backed regime, the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. Between 1986 and 1987, Bin Laden set up a base in eastern Afghanistan for several dozen of his own Arab soldiers. From this base, Bin Laden participated in some combat activity against the Soviets, such as the Battle of Jaji in 1987-90. Despite its little strategic significance, the battle was lionized in the mainstream Arab press that it was during this time that he became idolized by many Arabs. By 1988, Bin Laden had split from Maktab al-Khidmat. While Osama acted as support for Afghan fighters, Bin Laden wanted a more military role. One of the main points leading to the split and the creation of Al-Qaeda was Osama's insistence that Arab fighters be integrated among the Afghan fighting groups instead of forming a separate fighting force. Notes of a meeting of Bin Laden and others on August 20, 1988, indicate that Al-Qaeda was a formal group by that time, basically an organized Islamic faction. Its goal is to lift the word of God, to make his religion victorious. A list of requirements for membership itemized the following: listening ability, good manners, obedience, and making a pledge, by it, to follow one's superiors. According to Wright, the group's real name was not used in public pronouncements because its existence was still a closely held secret. His research suggests that Al-Qaeda was formed at an August 11, 1988, meeting between several senior leaders of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Abdullah Azzam, and Bin Laden, where it was agreed to join Bin Laden's money with the expertise of the Islamic Jihad organization and take up the jihadist cause elsewhere after the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan. Following the Soviet Union's withdrawal from Afghanistan in February 1989, Osama bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia as a hero of jihad. 102, along with his Arab Legion, he was thought to have brought down the mighty superpower of the Soviet Union. After his return to Saudi Arabia, bin Laden engaged in opposition movements to the Saudi monarchy while working for his family business. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait under Saddam Hussein on August 2, 1990, put the Saudi kingdom and the royal family at risk. With Iraqi forces on the Saudi border, Saddam's appeal to pan-Arabism was potentially inciting internal dissent. 1 week after King Fahd agreed to U.S. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney's offer of American military assistance, bin Laden met with King Fahd and Saudi Defense Minister Sultan bin Abdulaziz, telling them not to depend on non-Muslim assistance from the United States and others and offering to help defend Saudi Arabia with his Arab Legion. When Sultan asked how bin Laden would defend the fighters if Saddam used Iraqi chemical and biological weapons against them, he replied, "We will fight him with faith." Bin Laden's offer was rebuffed, and the Saudi monarchy invited the deployment of U.S. forces in Saudi territory. Bin Laden publicly denounced Saudi dependence on the U.S. forces, arguing that the Quran prohibited non-Muslims from setting foot in the Arabian Peninsula and that two holiest shrines of Islam, Mecca and Medina, the cities in which the Prophet Muhammad received and recited Allah's message, should only be defended by Muslims. He tried to convince the Saudi ulama to issue a fatwa condemning the American military deployment, but senior clerics refused out of fear of repression. Bin Laden's continued criticism of the Saudi monarchy led them to put him under house arrest, under which he remained until he was ultimately forced to leave the country in 1991. Meanwhile, on November 8, 1990, the FBI raided the New Jersey home of El Sayed Nosair, an associate of Al-Qaeda operative Ali Mohammed. They discovered copious evidence of terrorist plots, including plans to blow up New York City skyscrapers. This marked the earliest discovery of Al-Qaeda terrorist plans outside of Muslim countries. Nasser was eventually convicted in connection to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and, years later, admitted guilt for the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane in New York City on November 5, 1990. In 1999, the press reported that bin Laden and his Tunisian assistant Marez Ayadouni were granted citizenship and Bosnian passports in 1993 by the government in Sarajevo. The Bosnian government denied this information following the September 11 attacks, but it was later found that Ayadouni was arrested in Turkey and that at that time he possessed the Bosnian passport. Following this revelation, a new explanation was given that bin Laden did not personally collect his Bosnian passport and that officials at the Bosnian embassy in Vienna, which issued the passport, could not have known who bin Laden was at the time. The head of Albania's state intelligence service, Fedos Klosi, said that Osama was running a terror network in Albania to take part in the Kosovo War under the guise of a humanitarian organization, and it was reported to have been started in 1994. Claude Cater, who was a member, testified its existence during his trial. By 1998, 4 members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad were arrested in Albania and extradited to Egypt. The Mujahideen fighters were organized by Islamic leaders in Western Europe allied to him and Zawahiri. During his trial at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic quoted from a purported FBI report that bin Laden's Al-Qaeda had a presence in the Balkans and aided the Kosovo Liberation Army. He claimed bin Laden had used Albania as a launchpad for violence in the region and Europe. He claimed that they had informed Richard Holbrooke that KLA was being aided by Al-Qaeda, but the US decided to cooperate with the KLA and thus indirectly with Osama despite the 1998 United States Embassy bombings earlier. Milosevic had argued that the United States aided the terrorists, which culminated in its backing of the 1999 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia during the Kosovo War. The world watched in horror as the United States fell victim to the deadliest terrorist attack in history. After his initial denial, in the wake of the attacks, bin Laden announced, "What the United States is tasting today is nothing compared to what we have tasted for decades. Our Ummah has known this humiliation and contempt for over 80 years. Its sons are killed, its blood is spilled, its holy sites are attacked, and it is not governed according to Allah's command. Despite this, no one cares." In response to the attacks, the United States launched the War on Terror to depose the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and capture Al-Qaeda operatives, and several countries strengthened their anti-terrorism legislation to preclude future attacks. The CIA's Special Activities Division was given the lead in tracking down and killing or capturing bin Laden. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has stated that classified evidence linking Al-Qaeda and bin Laden to the September 11 attacks is clear and irrefutable. The UK government reached a similar conclusion regarding Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden's culpability for the September 11 attacks, although the government report noted that the evidence presented is not necessarily sufficient to prosecute the case. Bin Laden initially denied involvement in the attacks. On September 16, 2001, bin Laden read a statement later broadcast by Qatar's Al Jazeera satellite channel denying responsibility for the attack. In a videotape recovered by U.S. forces in November 2001 in Jalalabad, bin Laden was seen discussing the attack with Khaled al-Harbi in a way that indicates foreknowledge. The tape was broadcast on various news networks on December 13, 2001. The merits of this translation have been disputed. On March 16, 1998, Libya issued the first official Interpol arrest warrant against bin Laden and 3 other people. They were charged for killing Sylvan Becker, agent of Germany's Domestic Intelligence Service, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, in the Terrorism Department, and his wife Vera in Libya on March 10, 1994. Bin Laden was still wanted by the Libyan government at the time of his death. Osama bin Laden was first indicted by a grand jury of the United States on June 8, 1998, on charges of conspiracy to attack defense utilities of the United States, and prosecutors further charged that bin Laden was the head of the terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda, and that he was a major financial backer of Islamic fighters worldwide. Bin Laden became the 456th person listed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, when he was added on June 7, 1999, following his indictment along with others for capital crimes in the 1998 embassy attacks. Attempts at assassination and requests for the extradition of bin Laden from the Taliban of Afghanistan were met with failure before the bombing of Afghanistan in October 2001. In 1999, U.S. President Bill Clinton convinced the United Nations to impose sanctions against Afghanistan in an attempt to force the Taliban to extradite him. On October 10, 2001, bin Laden appeared as well on the initial list of the top 22 FBI most wanted terrorists, which was released to the public by the President of the United States George Bush, in direct response to the September 11 attacks, but which was again based on the indictment for the 1998 embassy attack. Bin Laden was among a group of 13 fugitive terrorists wanted on that latter list for questioning about the 1998 embassy bombings. Bin Laden remains the only fugitive ever to be listed on both FBI fugitive lists. Capturing Osama bin Laden had been an objective of the United States government since the presidency of Bill Clinton. Shortly after the September 11 attacks, it was revealed that President Clinton had signed a directive authorizing the CIA to apprehend bin Laden and bring him to the United States to stand trial after the 1998 United States Embassy bombings in Africa. If taking bin Laden alive was deemed impossible, then deadly force was authorized. On August 20, 1998, 66 cruise missiles launched by United States Navy ships in the Arabian Sea struck bin Laden's training camps near Khost in Afghanistan, missing him by a few hours. In 1999, the CIA, together with Pakistani military intelligence, had prepared a team of approximately 60 Pakistani commandos to infiltrate Afghanistan to capture or kill bin Laden, but the plan was aborted by the 1999 Pakistani coup d'état. In 2000, foreign operatives working on behalf of the CIA had fired a rocket-propelled grenade at a convoy of vehicles in which bin Laden was traveling through the mountains of Afghanistan, hitting one of the vehicles but not the one in which bin Laden was riding. In April 2011, various U.S. intelligence outlets traced bin Laden to Abbottabad, Pakistan. It was previously believed that bin Laden was hiding near the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan's federally administered tribal areas, but he was found 160 kilometers away in a 3-story mansion in Abbottabad, southwest of the Pakistan Military Academy. Osama bin Laden was killed in Abbottabad, Pakistan, on 2 May 2011, shortly after 1 a.m. local time by a United States military special operations unit. The operation, codenamed Operation Neptune Spear, was ordered by United States President Barack Obama and carried out in a U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, operation by a team of United States Navy SEALs from the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group, also known as informally by its former name, SEAL Team 6, of the Joint Special Operations Command, 251. With support from CIA operatives on the ground. The raid on bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad was launched from Afghanistan. After the raid, reports at the time stated that U.S. forces had taken bin Laden's body to Afghanistan for positive identification, then buried it at sea, in accordance with Islamic law, within 24 hours of his death. Subsequent reporting has called this account into question, citing, for example, the absence of evidence that there was an imam on board the USS Carl Vinson, where the burial was said to have taken place. It was widely reported by the press that bin Laden was fatally wounded by Robert J. O'Neill. However, it has also been widely discredited by witnesses, who claim that bin Laden was possibly already dead by the time O'Neill arrived, having been injured by an anonymous SEAL Team 6 member referred to under the pseudonym Red. According to Navy SEAL Matt Bissonette, bin Laden was struck by 2 suppressed shots to the side of the head from around 10 feet away after leaning out of his bedroom doorway to survey Bissonette and a point man. Once the Navy SEALs entered the bedroom, his body began convulsing before Bissonette and another SEAL responded by firing multiple shots into his chest. Through the rise and fall of Osama bin Laden, we've witnessed the raw power of ideology, the devastation of terrorism, and the resilience of the human spirit. But amidst the chaos and the darkness, there is hope. Hope in the resilience of communities torn apart by violence. Hope in the bravery of those who continue to fight for peace and justice. And hope in our collective ability to learn from the past and build a better tomorrow.